Welcome to Beyond the Margins, the podcast, the place where we engage, educate, empower, and elevate. I'm your lead learner and host, Dr. Shauna A. Each week, I sit down with some of the brightest minds and dynamic leaders in education to challenge traditional narratives, especially those shaping the experiences of students at the margins. Together, we explore new ways to reimagine schools, classrooms, and learning communities as spaces for growth and transformation. At Beyond the Margins, we center students too often overlooked, sharing the stories, strategies, and ideas that matter most. Voices long pushed aside are brought to the center. Welcome to Beyond the Margins. Did you know that when students pay attention and engage deeply in a lesson, their brains literally become more synchronized with each other and with the teacher, which leads to better learning outcomes? Research using real classroom brainwave monitoring shows that high brain-to-brain synchrony between students and their teachers predict stronger learning gains. Engagement isn't just a behavior, it's a neurobiological state. Today on Beyond the Margins, we're joined by Shauna King, educator, school culture consultant, and brain science guru. Ms. King has worked with over 14,000 educators nationwide, helping teachers understand what really motivates students and how to ignite engagement in classrooms. Today, we'll explore dopamine, intrinsic motivation, and how even small shifts in teaching can unlock student potential. Let's dive in. Thank you, Ms. King, for being with us Beyond the Margins today. We're excited to have you. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Butts. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. You are an expert. You are the guru of brain science and all things educational. You have the wonderful new TEDx TED Talk that you did that is getting some traction, getting some steam. But I've seen you in person, and I know what kind of magic you work on developing educators. So I'm very excited to talk to you today. Before we get started, though, tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you get here?
Awesome. Well, I started in education about years ago. Don't make me say that. Let's just say I've been in the game for a little bit. And I actually started as a substitute teacher. And I spent time doing that briefly in high school and then decided I thought the high school kids were a bit much and decided to find my space with middle school scholars. And as interesting as middle school students are, I loved teaching middle school, and I taught middle school for a bit. But I struggled with behavior management. I struggled with engaging brains, and I really wanted to keep my job and just couldn't figure. I wanted to learn how to do it a little bit better, and kind of got on a journey of learning myself. I've always been one who felt that as teachers, the best teachers are the ones who are always learning. And so I just got on a path to continue to do that. And so my journey took me outside of the classroom for a little bit, working in student services, working with students who were suspended for various offenses, usually alcohol, drug, tobacco violation, things like that. Then got into school culture work through positive behavior supports, restorative practices, things like that. And then went back to a school actually as a school principal. For the last 12 years, I've spent my days as a school culture climate consultant working with several districts across the country. I've had the opportunity to work with about 14,000 educators now.
Wow.
And it's just really an honor to be able to share and learn and really help teachers with some tools I felt like I didn't have when I was in the classroom about how to engage brains, improve behavior, and overall school culture. So yeah, it's a blessing and exciting to do the work.
Yeah, absolutely. You've already helped me. So let's help some of our Beyond the Margins audience wrap our head around these happy chemicals and the role of dopamine, right? Let's talk about dopamine and what that means for not only student engagement, but just overall motivation.
You know what I think, though? A lot of times when people think about dopamine, we think about excitement, like the wow factor. And while that can be part of it, as you know, dopamine also mainly is around predictability. And when it can predict what's about to happen, the analogy that I like to use is, if you're on a roller coaster, the dopamine is when you're going up that cliff. Here it comes, here it comes, here it comes. I know what's coming. I know I'm about to go over this exciting cliff and things like that. That's really where dopamine is, where some people think it's the ride down. It's really going up. So Understanding how dopamine motivates behavior, cognition is something that is really critical in today's classrooms when it talks about engaging children.
Help me understand. The dopamine is more geared to regiment, what students can anticipate, and those regular norms that may be set in a classroom or school learning space?
Absolutely, and I think the myth often is that dopamine is only around some super exciting games, prizes, and things like that, and while there's definitely space for that in the academic classroom, dopamine really thrives off saying, "I know how to succeed in this space." And so when we as educators outline in a way where there's predictability and I know the steps to success, that's that's how dopamine
Yeah.
starts ringing. I feel it because I know what's coming. I know how to do this. I feel successful at this. And that's really what gets the brain going.
Yeah, it makes me think about self-determination theory and the whole idea of competency and efficacy and understanding that I can anticipate, I know I have the skills or the supports to do what comes next. Yeah.
Absolutely. And when the brain knows what to do, it will want to do it.
Ah,
So when
it's
we talk about
programmed
young people,
to want to.
absolutely. When we say kids are unmotivated, a lot of times that motivation is because they don't quite understand what to do,
Mm.
how to master it, how to be successful at it. Because if I can figure out what to be successful at, how to be as successful at it, your brain wants to do it.
And so that speaks to the necessity for clarity and intentionality from the educators that are trying to get kids motivated to do a thing.
You went there. Yeah, it really does start with us. It really does start with us as educators for us being clear, whether it's our lesson or whatever goal and objective we have for them, that we can articulate it in a way to say, this is where we're going today, class. This is where we're going. And these are the steps, and I'm with you all the way. Absolutely.
Can you walk us through the process of how the brain decides on what is going to focus on, pay attention to, engage with?
Honestly, a lot of that, Dr. Butts, has a lot to do with the age. We know that our young people, the brain is underdeveloped. Um, our brain fully develops hopefully around mid-20s, even though I've read some things lately that says it's a little bit later.
Wow.
But if you think about a phone that's on 20%, you are not going to open up random apps if I'm only on 20%. I'm going to be very intentional about how
Mm.
I use that 20%.
Right.
The adolescent brain is really doing the same thing. It is saying, what should I pay attention to? What is critical? What is relevant for me? What am I really curious about? And it's making intentional choices. And what's interesting is the research keeps changing because at one particular time we used to say that 1 minute times the age of the child
Mhm,
is about
mhm.
how
I
long
remember
you
that.
probably heard me saying that
Yep,
before.
yep.
I'd love to tell you we had that much time anymore, because I don't know what 13-year-old you think you got 13 minutes to convince his brain to engage.
And with adolescents, dopamine is not the only chemical running through their brain. That dopamine is competing with a whole lot of other chemicals, right?
Absolutely. It's adolescence.
Yeah.
They got the hormones going on. They've got so many different things they don't even quite understand what's going on from day to day. So yes, dopamine is just one of many
Yeah.
chemicals and hormones and neurotransmitters that are happening, and they are trying to figure out what's going on. And sometimes we don't know, and they don't know either.
Down it. I think I heard you say one time, you asked a kid, "Why did you do something?" They say, "I don't know." They literally don't know.
It's almost like a deer caught in headlights. Why were you doing that? Well, how many times do I have to tell you to do that? We're asking all these random questions that they don't know the answer to.
Look, let's complicate this even one more step, and let's
Okay.
talk about like the role of ACEs, adverse
Mm,
childhood experiences and trauma.
yeah.
While again, all of these chemicals are converging on brain and impulse reactions. What is the role of stress and trauma in
Yeah.
this motivational chemical
Yeah.
reaction?
I'm so glad you asked that because that's something that at one particular point we may say, oh, there's one or two kids in our classes who this might impact. And maybe we could refer them to the counselor, the psychologist for some special attention. All classroom teachers have to understand the role of stress on the brain. And I think the easiest way for us to even think about it, even before we talk trauma, is Dr. Bus, last time you were extremely stressed, did you ever forget anything? Did you ever
Oh,
have difficulty
yeah,
focusing?
Yeah, blackouts and can't remember 2 seconds ago. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So if we think as adults, we know how stress impacts us and how we show up and the focus we have. But
Mhm.
sometimes with young people, we are less patient. We
Yeah,
expect that they're supposed to show up every single day, ready, thinking about nothing else except
yeah,
what you are deciding to teach them, and that's just really not true. And so we have to be sensitive to the fact that the brains often were involved in some other thought process before they came to your
yeah,
classroom. And yeah, and that's real. And if you add the ACEs and trauma and the things that we are really worried about now, um, they limit the brain's ability to really be able to focus and to be clear on what exactly the task can be. So we have to be sensitive to that.
yeah. It reminds me again of Maslow, and when we want them to do that higher order thinking, that's really self-actualization, and they're
Absolutely.
thinking about bed, food, water, shelter, safety, and so how do we traverse that? How can educators make learning more relevant with this understanding of the brain science?
That's a really good question. And I wish I had asked myself that question when I was teaching, because there are a lot of lessons that would not have fallen flat if I first started with, what can I do to the my students will be interested. I think often as adults we just assume the students should pay attention. They should do this, and because they should
Mhm,
do this,
mhm,
but making that connection and trying to find out what's relevant. So, for example, if there was a government lesson, starting with a question, like for example, what if there was a school where you had absolutely no say in what you were doing, the rules, you had no say in how you were being taught, and everything was just being told to you? How would you
mhm.
feel? You start your lessons with a hook question, something to engage the brain, a little bit of curiosity. And if, oh, I don't like it, I wouldn't do that. Okay, okay. And now, well, let's look at history at a time where that's exactly what happened, right? So you find something that causes them to engage in it, and then come back and say, okay, now this is directly related to what we were talking about.
Yeah, in my experience, that takes a level of relationship and rapport with students that has to be established before we get to that point where we need them to show up in a particular way. And so I think understanding the brain science of kids, uh, we if you've been in school long enough, a kid has cursed you out or kirked out and came back the next day and like they forgot, right? And to be able to move forward with the understanding, hey, look, this is a developing young person. They may not even remember in the moment, or maybe we interpreted it very differently.
Because sometimes we start, and I'm speaking for myself, we're not going to have that today. Don't come in here with that attitude you had yesterday. And
Yeah.
they're looking at you like, what are you talking about? I don't even
Yeah.
remember yesterday.
Right. What does irrelevant instruction cost students psychologically and cognitively?
You know what? We want school to be a place where young people find valuable. And every time there is an irrelevant lesson that I cannot
Mhm.
connect to, young people are making a decision about the importance of school.
Yeah, yeah.
How often I show up, how I show up, do I engage? And if you think about kindergarten and first grade students, they are excited. I remember my own two children, they're excited to go to school. They're excited to go to school. And you've been in education while you watch that trajectory. They go from young people being excited to go to school to, right?
Yeah. Is this gonna be graded? Do
I
we gotta
want to
do
do
some
this.
more? Yeah, right.
And I'm not saying as adults we are all responsible for that, but I do
Yeah.
think there's some level of, something that we should do to say what's happening in our schools where kids get to the point where they don't see the reason for it. They don't see and it's not all students, but that
Mhm.
they don't see the connection. And one of the biggest ways for adults to tap into that is spend the day as a student.
Mm.
And one of the things that I get to do is I get to go to schools, and I'm a student for a day. And I just go from class to class to class. And I'm telling you, it is the most eye-opening thing that
Yeah.
often educators can do, to see what it's like to have your behind in a seat every day, going from class to class, and how the adults are engaging with you. And most schools I go to, they say, "Oh, it's that last period of the day. It's
Mhm.
that last hour of the day. The kids are just off the chain." You would be too. If
Yeah,
you had
yeah. You had to
gone
follow
gone
that
through this.
schedule. Yeah,
Exactly, follow their
yeah.
schedule.
that fifth period, sixth period, whatever that last period in your school day, teachers are feeling it too. Kids are feeling it. Teachers are feeling it. You gotta dig deep in that last period.
And that takes pre-planning. It really does.
What is a danger of relying too heavily on external rewards? I know that there's this idea of incentivizing learning and behaviors, but what
Mhm.
happens when we depend too much on these external rewards as motivators?
Yeah. And so we don't want to do that. And I understand. And I even have been involved with programs where we're intentional about catching kids doing the right thing and incentivizing for things like that. But sometimes I think the issue is often when it turns from an incentive to almost bribery.
Yeah,
If you do this, then this will happen. And that's not what we want. However, if we incentivize randomly where they don't quite know when it's going to happen, we kind of catch them doing something. By the way, here
yeah,
is this incentive. I think it's beneficial because if they get to the point where they can predict the incentive all the time,
yep,
then it gets to the point where, okay, I'm up in the ante. Okay, well, now I
yeah.
only want this. Now I only want this. Now are you going to give me this? And that's definitely never what we want. We want to develop that level of intrinsic motivation that is really what's going to help take them forward.
Yeah, that's what's going to sustain engagement, learning over the course of a lifetime.
Beyond the Margins, the podcast. We'll return in a moment.
Your Divine Journey, LLC, is here to walk with you through life's ups and downs. Whether you're seeking therapy, life coaching, support, or personal consultations, we provide a safe, empowering space to heal, grow, and step into your best self. Your journey is unique. Let's make it divine. Connect with us today and start moving forward with clarity, confidence, and peace. www.yourdivinejourneyllc.com.
At the Travel Bureau, we are dedicated to creating bespoke luxury experiences for the discerning traveler, specializing in detail-rich journeys designed with heart and intention. We turn your dream getaway into a beautiful, curated reality. Wherever you're going, the Travel Bureau will get you there in style, comfort, and joy.
If you're teaching urban, alternative, or non-traditional students and wondering why engagement feels harder than ever, the new book by Dr. Shauna A is for you. Unlocking student engagement isn't theory. It's real strategies for real classrooms, built on trust, relevance, and relationships. And educators across the country are already responding. Unlocking Student Engagement debuted at #1 in cultural pedagogies, philosophy and social aspects of education, educational professional development, and educational certification and development. Grab your copy today wherever you buy books, and let's change how engagement shows up in our classrooms. Welcome back to Beyond the Margins.
What common practices unintentionally shut down motivation? In the classroom, teachers may be taking some steps or making some maneuvers that, have a reverse effect. They shut down motivation as opposed to supporting it. Can you identify any of those?
Well, one of my books is called Children Are Listening, What We Say Matters. Cheap plug. Did you see that?
No, I
Okay.
like that cheap plug. Slide it in. Now we're gonna have to cover the book sliding over the screen right now. Yeah.
I think the language that we use, for me, this was one of the biggest changes that I had to think about what I was putting out into my classroom. So, for example, when I say something like, all right, this is gonna be really hard, guys. What we're about to do is gonna be really
Mhm.
difficult.
Yeah.
While I think I'm preparing them to gear up, I'm really causing their brain to be a little bit stressed.
Okay.
So if I said something that encouraged them, this is going to take our learning to the next level. Our brains are going to grow on this activity, and I'm going to show you what you've learned and how we're preparing for this.
Mhm.
Just how I even introduce activities or new concepts can make a difference in what the brain hears, because there's part of it is the connection to my emotion. Fear is not a motivator.
Yeah.
Um, it really is going to impact whether or not I want to engage in what the material is. And so making me to the point where, oh my gosh, I better, so if you don't buckle down here, you're going to fail. Okay,
Yeah.
and I get it. And I've said stuff like that myself. But how about if you choose to intentionally focus for the next 2 lessons, you are
You're
guaranteed
gonna pass.
you're gonna pass
Yeah.
this, right?
Yeah.
We're saying the same thing, but
Yeah.
totally different ways, and the
Yeah.
brain hears it differently.
Yeah.
And so I think well-meaning teachers, just like myself, sometimes just learning better ways to speak to the brain to ignite that motivation can absolutely make a big difference in our classrooms.
Yeah. Framing matters. You tell a little kid, hey, we're gonna go into this place and there's gonna be a scary man with red hair. And you're taking them to McDonald's and it's Ronald McDonald, and you frame this thing up in such a way that they internalize fear without even knowing why. So
Exactly.
yeah, teachers, we do that a lot. We project.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things I even think sometimes in the intention of motivating, we think we're motivating them to say, if you don't do this, you're going to fail. Well, how about if
Mhm.
you do this, you will pass?
You pass.
We're real
Yeah,
good at almost saying the worst case scenario. Give the kid the best case scenario and let them
yeah,
choose.
yeah. The glass is actually half full, not just half empty. If a teacher listening right now want to tap into the dopamine effect tomorrow, what's a simple step that they can take to start changing that way that they're approaching motivation in their classroom?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And I'm going to answer your question with the question they should ask themselves. Why should someone want to learn this?
Mm,
Whatever you're going to teach tomorrow, ask yourself, why would somebody want to learn this? And your answer cannot be because it's on the state assessments or because
yeah.
it's only on the test. That cannot be. And when you realize why someone will want to engage with something, lead with that. Kids
Mm,
need the why. They really do. I know
yeah.
sometimes we don't think that they do, but as adults, if you go to a staff development as someone who does professional development, I know the brains in my room are saying, why do I have to be here?
Mhm.
Kids are the same way. Why do I have to be there? Start with the why. And when you give them the why from the beginning, that can help the dopamine. And the second thing I'd say is act like you're interested in your own content.
Yeah, yeah. Goes a long way, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You talked about the mirror neurons. You talked about mirror neurons. And so when you begin to act like this is important and important to me, young people will adopt that as their own. How would you support school leaders in enabling their staff, preparing and training their staff to make sure that they're reaching these motivating or motivation checkpoints?
I am very sensitive to the classroom teacher for those of us in education because there's so many demands, right?
Hmm.
There's curricula that's come down, there's all of these requirements. And then we're asking them, now please make sure that your content is interesting. Now make sure that you're engaging the brains of your students. And while we are, um, I have just found that to humanize the work that we do,
Mm.
to be able to think about who these young people are and whether we're 30, 40, or whatever years old, to remember what it was like to be a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
Remember what it's like to be a 10-year-old. And, when we say, oh, well, they should just know school's important. If we can be real, did we
Mhm.
think that at 9 years
No,
old?
no, it
Right?
was Tuesday, so I went. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so to be sensitive to the fact that they are children and to always keep that in the forefront of our mind. And so because they're children, what excites them? What excites them is immediate gratification. It does,
Yeah.
especially this generation who is used to quick quick feedback. This generation gets, we know about the technology and stuff like that. We
Yep.
want them to wait 3 or 4 lessons before they get some feedback. It doesn't work
No.
that way.
No.
They're used to quick feedback, whether it's from video games, something that they're watching, their social media, quick likes, quick
Mhm.
click. They are. And so I think it's important for educators to constantly study our students.
Mhm. Yeah.
Study who your students are. If you have 9-year-olds, be a master and learn about what's happening with the generation of 9-year-olds you're teaching now. Not the
Yeah.
9-year-olds you taught maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, because that's not now.
Right.
In
Right.
any other profession, we would want a doctor or a dentist who stayed up on what
Yeah.
was current and new. And so as educators, as brilliant as we are, and we are brilliant, we have to continue to learn about the subject. We have to continue to learn about children. And children today are showing up differently than even children 5 years ago.
We have to curate our lessons and our experiences in the same way that their social media threads are curated for them. They know their whole lives have been targeted, algorithm driven to their interests, their relevance, and then we must do the same thing. We have to compete.
And that's hard to hear. That's hard to hear because no one wants to compete with
Yeah,
technology. But we do have to take some of the secrets that technology knows about our children's brains and use them in the classroom.
absolutely. Here we go. Imagine a school fully aligned with brain science. A school fully aligned with brain science. What does that look like, and what would it do for kids?
Ooh, that's a great question. And you're going to let me dream a little bit.
Yeah, because then we can get to building it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let me tell you what it includes. It includes recess. Can I be real? It
Yes,
includes
please.
recess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not a 10-minute one. It includes breaks and opportunities for free play, especially for our young children. But
Mhm.
even for high school, there is a down period, not just lunch. There's a space for that.
Can
There
I speak to
is,
that?
yes,
I
please.
used to work at Duke Ellington School of the Arts in
In
DC.
DC.
Yeah, and they have a great model. First school I ever worked in where the whole school took lunch for an hour at the same time. The principal, the teachers, the students could lay in the grass. They can go to their favorite teacher class. You
Hmm.
see teachers and students having conversations on the stage. It became a community during lunch hour. And so that's the kind of non-traditional approach that we don't see in schools. Like that's a very rare thing. And it did wonders for the culture.
Yes. I'm glad to know that exists. And if you think about that's a school that values the arts, but if you think about the connection between the arts and brain science, it's not a stretch at all. And many times the fact that you said it's happening at a school of the arts is actually not surprising to me.
Yeah.
But having that space, I also think today's schools would involve a lot of times for exploration learning.
Mm,
Where and I think it was Google who originally had the model where there were times where employees would come to work where their job was just to create,
mm,
and they gave them space to create. And more and more with what's growing with artificial intelligence, there are schools that are saying, let's allow our children to create because just gathering information is no longer the answer. You
yeah.
can gather
Yeah.
any information you want right now with
Just
a
need the
couple of
prompt, right?
just the right
Yeah.
prompt, just the right
Yep.
prompt. So gone are the days where school is the space for information. But what
Mm,
about if schools can be the place for transforming thinking, teaching
wow.
children how to think, how to create, how to collaborate even, with whatever the tools may be. Not to replace learning. I'm not saying that at all. There definitely is a space for making sure that we are not um, causing the brain to not work because we've got so
Mm,
many tools. But at the same time, there can be ways to build the curiosity and take the curiosity that children have and teach them how to build something and create something unique and be ones who discover learning. And so I think a brain-based school is one that acknowledges the stage that the brain is in, whether it's, the young children or adolescents, and helps them to maximize where they are at that stage. And so it's going to be a creative space. It's going to be not it's still going to have structure. It has to have structure, has to
yeah.
have predictability in there, but there's definitely going to be a lot more. It's going to be much more student centered than I think many of our schools today are.
And to me, that feels very much like Back to the Future, right? Going back to the essence. What's one myth about motivation that you would like to disrupt?
The myth about motivation is it can only come from something extrinsic. You absolutely can create intrinsic motivation. Many people, when they think motivation, they think that students have to already come with it.
Mm,
It is something that an educator, an environment, a school can spark. We have the power. I can't make kids do anything. I'm not saying we're making them do anything, but there is definitely evidence through curiosity, through relevance. There are things that we can do to create environments where motivation grows.
Yeah, we didn't even get a chance to dig into environments this time. Oh, we'll have to bring you back to talking about environment. And I think about school educational environment as location, place, and space, right?
Mm,
Location, the geography in which that school happens to be in, the place being the actual school, and the space being the actual classroom or learning environment. So we'll have to bring you back to talk about the environment and the brain science, because very much so the environment is pedagogy too.
absolutely.
Um, I've taught in places where the instruction started in the parking lot and told me a lot of what I needed to know and learn about
Mm,
what was to happen on the inside of the building.
wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
we'll come back for that. Last question before we get you out of here.
Sure.
What's one small step an educator can take tomorrow that will push engagement, some of that intrinsic motivation that we're looking for tomorrow?
Yeah. Here it is. It's another question. But
Okay.
but the question is this. Ask your students, how can I make this class better for you?
Wow. Wow. That's something we don't do.
No,
That's an easy question. The kids will tell you, but that's a question we don't ask often enough.
no, because it's a very vulnerable question. And I'll say
Yeah.
how can we make this class better for us? Let's do that. That's even better to make it a
Mm,
collective approach. So it's not just what the teacher can do. But I think whether they are second grade or seventh grade or 12th grade, they will have an answer. And you have
yeah.
immediately gotten some buy-in. We say that word buy-in all the time. You've gotten
Yeah.
some buy-in about the learning in the classroom because you've heard what they've said.
Folks, this has been the incomparable Miss Shauna King. Your family to Beyond the Margins. We'll definitely have you back. What's next for you? What's on the horizon? What's your next project we should be looking out for?
So I am glad you asked me that. I have a really exciting project. I have a nonprofit that we've been working on a documentary,
Ah, nice.
and the documentary is called The Illiteracy Playbook. It tells the story about the history of literacy and some of the systemic injustices that have been surrounding that. But Forever Free and the Illiteracy Playbook, stay tuned for more about that.
Sister, thank you for being a soldier and a warrior and pushing us forward. We appreciate your hard work. We'll have you back very soon. Here's the truth from Beyond the Margins. Motivation is something we can spark. When we lead with relevance, predictability, and curiosity, we don't just teach content. We light up young minds, reflect their potential, and give them a reason to care. I wonder, what would happen if we fully accepted that motivation isn't missing, is waiting on our design, our courage, and our creativity to step up?
Next time on Beyond the Margins.
You can tell in an instant by looking at a lesson plan
Yep.
what's about to go down.
Yep. Lesson plans are intellectual documents. For some reason, I don't know why people don't believe that. They're intellectual documents. What it is the opportunity for you as a teacher to sit down with your administrator and engage in this intellectual document so they can give you feedback and ask you questions and push it back and say, what sources are you using? How are students going to be able to access that source? Are you using universal design to make sure that everyone is engaged and can access the information? And it's that conversation that you're having weeks before lesson plans get in front of students. I'm still stuck on the fact that people hand in lesson plans on Friday to use on Monday. And I'm like, whoa, when did your administrator have a chance to engage and give you feedback?
Thank you for joining us on Beyond the Margins. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, share this episode, rate and review the show, and let's keep the dialogue going. If you would like to connect, email me at Sean@beyondthemarginsllc.com. That's SOHN at beyondthemarginsllc.com. It's been a pleasure being with you. Until next time, keep teaching, keep learning, keep leading, and keep pushing beyond the margins.